Hello, this is René from Dossa and Locust, and today I'm gonna walk you through our track Get Nasty.
Get nasty.
So the idea of this track started when I was thinking that the drums in drum and bass started to sound a bit dull, lifeless and synthetic nowadays. That is because in fact what we do nowadays is we synthesize the most of our drum layers in drum and bass. I love doing that as well because it just gives you perfect control over the sound. You can fit it exactly in your mix and it will be very clean if you do it that way. But for this track, I wanted to have a different approach and roll with a more realistic acoustic sounding drum kit. And the whole journey of this track started with a sponsorship of this company called TuneTrack. They are the developers of a plugin called Superior Drummer, which is emulating an acoustic drum kit. And the very first steps I did with Superior Drummer are the foundation of Get Nasty. You can see me having no clue about the plugin yet by having like way too many cymbals here, even randomly placing a snare drum on top there that doesn't even play in the track. But sometimes this is how the inspiration comes for a track. I love trying out new plugins, and whenever I learn them, I just come up with things I wouldn't have come up with by the techniques that I already know the ins and outs of. So it's just a funny story by the side. So sometimes the inspiration doesn't come from thinking about a melody or anything, but just by accident or by just trying out new techniques. Unfortunately, I can't show you all the instances of Superior Drummer in this track because we rendered some of them because of CPU usage. But if I play you the drums solo, you can already hear that they have a very acoustic vibe. Yeah, so the main groove of the track definitely comes from this hi-hat pattern. It's super simple, but every element in the track is revolving around this drum loop. So check out the track when the cursor hits here, how all the elements are leading into the next first beat, which is an open hi-hat again. Even more drastic when the cursor hits here. So everything is just playing along this pattern here. What else do we have in the hi-hats? Let's go into detail. So as we just heard the Superior Drummer layer here, we then layered some more open hats that we had in our sample library, some offbeat stuff here to give it more of a groove. A cowbell on the third hit always works, by the way. And then we just layered some closed hi-hats to give it a faster groove. On the bottom here, we have another break done in Superior Drummer. We did that in another session. We actually made some breaks in 87 beats per minute, which is the half of drum and bass. And the idea behind that was like the roots of drum and bass are sampling old funk breaks that were played around 90 BPM. So we did record them in Superior Drummer at this tempo and then pitch them up and have them play as if we would sample a funk break, basically. What we then have is just some other samples here. And this sample here and the conga are getting the listener's attention back because, as you can see, it has looped quite a few times still here. And through stuff like this, the listener is gonna get back his attention because over here some new elements are gonna be introduced. In that case, it's some shakers. And another break from Superior Drummer. And then again, here the break of the track and then some toms. Just some samples basically. And another break and some tambourines are gonna be introduced. That's a cool way of keeping progress in a loop-based genre, by the way. Just introducing new elements every few bars and speeding up the tempo in this case. So all these shakers are just giving you a faster groove. But yeah, that was it with the hi-hat stuff. A very popular question is always kick and snare drums. The kick drum in this case was done with this plugin called Kick 2 by Sonic Academy. Really great plugin as well. What it does, it creates a fundamental here. You can add some harmonics, which we did in that case, and then you can really create how this sound is going to behave really detailed. So you have a pitch envelope and an amplitude envelope that you can control so detailed. As you can see, I can zoom in here to ridiculous amounts. You could synthesize a kick drum in Serum as well, and I love doing that as well. But I just feel with Kick 2, I have a bit more control over how exactly the sound is behaving. But yeah, I can do a different tutorial about that if you want to know more about that. The kick drum sounds like this, by the way. So really simple. On the snare drum, we did layer a few more sounds. But you can already hear that the foundation of it is the Superior Drummer snare. Directly out of Superior Drummer, not really much post-processing. What you gotta keep in mind though with plugins like Superior Drummer is they are not really made for electronic music per se. So all the sounds are gonna be very raw. They have a lot of dynamic range, and you don't really want that in a genre like drum and bass. So we really limited and clipped the hell out of those sounds just to reduce the dynamic range and fit it in a drum and bass context. What we did add to this Superior Drummer sound is a transient. I like to synthesize all our transients in Serum. We do a little trick where you start a sine wave off axis, and it creates this little click. You can really determine how exactly the click is going to sound by changing the phase. Again, transients are a topic on its own, and if anyone knows me, I can talk hours about transients. So if you want to know more about that, leave us a comment and I will do a tutorial about how to synthesize transients, how to make them work with your sounds. But yeah, anyway, that's that. And then another layer that is just filling up the higher frequency range. So in context, just giving you this kind of sound. That's why it's named like that. And then just a few more noises done in Serum. This one. And then some claps. You may wonder how or where these samples come from. That's always a thing that bugs me with these kind of tutorials, that the producers show what they did with the sounds, but not how they were actually made. What we use a lot is we reuse the samples that we did in different projects. So this snare layer, for example, without effects, sounds like this. So it's a really fat snare. We did this snare drum for Electric Boogie VIP, is an older track of us. We never finished the track, but I really liked how the snare drum sounds. There are also, like in this case, a lot of layers involved, but I just bounced out the finished product, and now I can use this snare, use it as a layer, and just EQ out those frequencies that I don't need. And the more you do this, the better your sounds will sound. So tip on the side, just reuse your sounds. You can use them in a different context and they're gonna sound different. That's just a way how you can create your sound. You know, that's how people are gonna recognize you. If you just reuse stuff, just make them better with every track. These claps right here, was just about to talk about them. It's just two clap samples, one hard pan to the left and one to the right, just to give you the sensation of a stereo width. I mean, usually you don't want your snare drum to be in stereo because it's a main element of the track and all the main elements should be in the center. But still, like, we don't do this with the fundamental or with the transient, obviously, but those claps, they are not really missing if I don't play them. So check this. But especially on headphones, it's gonna give you a wider snare drum. So let's check it out here. So yeah, that's just a little trick right here. And then we layered a ghost snare that is just like doing this kind of, this like shuffly kind of thing that you want to have. Yeah, that's kick and snare basically, or all the drums. Just one more thing, you could maybe see these sidechain layers before. What they do is they're not going anywhere, they're not really playing, they're just being used as sidechain triggers. We're triggering with those short samples, we're just triggering a compressor, because what we want is, if you listen to the superior drummer here, it's clashing actually. It's playing at the same time like the snare drum. And also at the same time as the kick drum, because it's playing on every beat. Okay, now superior drum is not playing. There you go. If you listen to the kick drum, it's gonna clash, right? So what you want to do is you want to duck all the hi-hats when kick and snare are hitting. So check this out. That's a cool trick to use to fit your kick and snare in your mix, make them prominent without making them too loud. We have a second group as well, where all the bass stuff is going through, and this is also sidechained whenever kick and snare hit. You can't really hear it because whenever it gets stuck, the kick and snare are playing, so there's nothing missing for you. You can't perceive any sidechain effect. It's just a mixing trick. So really trigger it down so kick and snare are gonna have all the space that they need. Speaking of bass, this is the bass sounds. And the main bass definitely are those layers. And the whole idea of layering noise on top of a bass comes, at least for me, from thinking about the days when I had like my first car and it had a really crappy sound system, but still I would always crank up the bass fully. And what happened then was like the speaker membrane just couldn't handle the bass anymore and was starting to crackle. And I'm kind of wanted to emulate this effect by adding these crackles on top of the bass. It kind of gives you the sensation that there's more bass in there than there actually is, at least for me. And the sub bass right here, as you can see, is a moke bass. We did that with all the tracks in the album. Whenever we did a sub bass in a soft synthesizer, like Serum for example, we would at a later production stage go and replace those layers with a moke sub 37. It's an analog synthesizer and it just sounds awesome, as you can hear. It just sounds really warm. There's little to no post processing there, just one EQ that isn't even doing much. Because it has a really warm, rounded up sound. There's no peaks in the sound. It just sounds really nice and it really adds value to the track. On top of that, we have these noise layers. It may look a bit messy that we have 3 noise layers, but each of those layers is only playing exactly the frequencies that we need here, creating this together. And the principle for all of those is the same, basically. You run a noise oscillator together with a sine wave or just some lower frequency content through a distortion unit. Because what it does, it kind of glues those sounds together. If you only distort noise, it's gonna sound awful. It's just gonna sound different. Just check this out. Without the sine. It almost feels like you can hear the oscillation of the sine wave together with the noise layer, because the distortion unit is going to behave differently depending on the frequency content it gets. So if it gets more low end, for me it feels like it's going to clip out some of the higher frequencies and is oscillating like the lower sine wave it's gonna get. So this is a principle that I use a lot with sounds. What else do we have here? Yeah, this respace. The track for a very long time sounded like this. It got played by quite a few DJs that way, and even got played on Radio 1 like that. But we still thought that we could improve it and could use something that's playing in the gap right here. And we thought, like, since this track is just such an ode to the old school drum and bass, we're going to use the most obvious sound, which is a respace. And what a respace is saw waves detuned to each other. 12 voices on the first oscillator in that case, 16 on this. These two oscillators detuned again, and then just ran through a filter to give it some movement, and then through distortion. The effect, or the sound without effects, you can already recognize it. What the distortion does in this case is just adding some harmonics and just some crackle in the high end. We even ran it into a group right here that has like really drastic saturation after reverb, which gives you a very wide sound. It's a send effect, so it's not 100% playing, it's just added to it, just give you the sensation that the sound is going really over the top without sounding messy. One more sound I want to show you appears only in the second drop, so only those who listen to the whole track know it. And it's this sound right here. Oh, I forgot these, I think. Yeah, I disabled those effects when going through the project before this video. Anyway, here this sound is just, that's stuff I love to do. It's like a really sound design kind of thing. If I disable the effects right here, it sounds really boring. And this is a principle I use a lot. You just create some simple frequency content, round frequency content. It just feels round because it's just a sine wave playing, being frequency modulated by another sine wave with some harmonics. And then we drastically distort it. And what makes the difference here on the sound is the way how the distortion unit is gonna get the sound. If I disable this EQ here, the track is sound completely different because the distortion unit is trying to make sense of these lower frequencies right here as well, and it's just clipping overall. This run right here, it's minus 24, minus 25 dB nearly. If I disable this notch, it's gonna have this frequency content here, and it's gonna go over the top there. But since I removed this area, the whole sound can focus more on this kind of area. So yeah, that's a trick that I use a lot. So whenever you really distort something over the top, make sure to have control about the frequency content that the distortion unit gets. On top of here, we have some sounds that may look randomly placed, and without context, they sound actually random. They are actually complementing the melody of here, the main melody. And the principle for all of those is the same. Whenever I want some sounds to fill in the gaps right here, I don't want to sit here while writing the track and be like, okay, I need a phasey respace sound right here, because at the time I create something for this little short amount of time, I would have forgotten what I was supposed to do. So a technique that we use a lot is resampling our own stuff. So sometimes I would just sit here and create some bass sounds without thinking about how to use them later. So this was a sound design session. Whoops. Without the effects, it sounded like this. And what I then did, I just cut out a phrase from that, if you want to call it like that. Just like... and pitched it up 4 semitones so that we are in the right key of the track, and just added some more effects. And through that, I just have these little steps that give the track a bit more character. You can't really recognize them, but if I play the track without them, it's gonna sound not as special. So this really helped to lead into the elements that are coming in. But that's already everything about the bass sounds. The last folder, or one of the last folders I've prepared, is melody and atmosphere. Here we have more traditional instruments. The idea behind the intro of this track was to have it sound like someone is playing a record on tape or vinyl, and someone is stopping the record player and then starting it again. That was the idea. Yeah, really, really dumb idea actually. You would think that this is just a disco sample that we used, but no, we actually went in there and created that our own by layering traditional instruments. And the first layer here is Repro. It's a plugin by Yuhi where they emulate a Prophet 5 synthesizer, which is a classic synth. And then some plugins by a company called Spectrasonics. For example, this one is called Keyscape. And it's a Rhodes in that case. And it just sounds so convincing because they really went in there and sampled that instrument, the ins and outs, every note multiple times. And it just sounds like you would record a real Rhodes. Then we have another Keyscape here, which is an acoustic piano. And then just some more stuff like another repro, and then a Trillion, which is emulating an acoustic bass, another plugin by Spectrasonics. Big ups Spectrasonics. Then here just like some drum rolls, crashes. They're not really special. Yeah, and that's the melody stuff already. One layer I'm particularly proud of is these ones. Whoops. These ones actually. It's ran through an Ensoniq DP4 effects unit. It's the effect unit that Daft Punk used for the album Discovery. The whole album has a very distinctive sound when it comes to their phasers, and I tried to emulate that for a very, very long time, but I just couldn't with software until I found out that they used this Ensoniq DP4 hardware unit, and I found one on eBay, and I just had to buy it. And even though you can't really hear the phase that much in the track, it still adds value to it for me. And even if there's just one person outside there thinking like, hey, that sounded like Daft Punk, then my goal is achieved. It's just a way of adding value and just hiding some things in the details. Then we have the vocal here.
Get nasty.
Before the drop, which is just me saying get nasty. Then we affected it. I think we used vocal synth by Isotope back then just to do some 4-man shifting and pitching it down. And then we added another load of effects on there just to make it sound cooler. And that is exactly the thing like with the DP4, we just could have gone on Splice and just used a random shout sample there. But we prefer to do stuff like this on our own, because even though nobody is going to know that it's one of us saying get nasty here, we still know, and when playing out you feel really cool. And also that's just a way of getting yourself into the track, you know. That was it already. I mean, the last thing here are just the effects. It's literally 3 layers, just some noise risers. And that's it. There's not more to the track. So yeah, I hope you learned something today with this walkthrough. If there's anything I rushed too much or any technique you want to hear more about, leave us a comment and we will do a video about that. As you can see, we're still building up this YouTube channel, so we really need your help to understand what you want to see. And also it would mean a lot to us if you could subscribe to our channel and ring the notification bell, and also share this video around so we can grow this channel a bit. Would mean a lot to us. Anyway, thanks for watching and see you on the next video. Peace.